I want to tell you about the Sallie House. I want to tell you everything I've learnt about the Sallie House, who lived in it, who loved in it, who died in it. And it's really called the Finney House, but we'll get to that later. Let me start by telling you who built it. Michael C. Finney built the house. He was an Irish immigrant who arrived in America in 1840. He spent some of his time in New York, learning his trade around the docks, and then he moved to Missouri. Now, when he moved to Missouri, there was another family living there called the Catherines. They too, the Catherines, were Irish immigrants as well, but they had a daughter, Catherine, who was actually born in America, in Vermont. She was born in 1838, and her dad was a music teacher. I could find very little on her mother, but I'm assuming her mother was a homemaker, as most ladies were back in the day. Now, Michael met Catherine, they fell in love, and they got married. So they married in 1854. They married in Lexington, Missouri on December 31st, 1854. Now, in 1856, while still in Lexington, they had their first child, James. James was born in Liberty, which is in Missouri. But 7 months after he was born, Michael and Catherine decided to move to Atchison in Kansas and make a life there. They were one of the pioneering families of Atchison, to be exact. So when Michael got there, his job was as a wharf master, a merchant dealing in produce and other supplies. He had a general merchandise store on the levee, and they lived above that store. So Catherine, baby James, and Michael lived above the store in two little rooms that were up there. In 1858, little Mamie was born, Mamie Finney. Her name was Maria, but they called her Mamie. She was born on June 19 in 1858, but unfortunately, as it happened a lot back in the day, little Mamie didn't get much older than 15 months. She passed away in September of 1859. In 1861, Catherine became pregnant again, and little Agnes Marie Finney was born. She was born in October of 1861. Then later on, things still all going well, little Charles C. Finney was born. Now, Charles was born on February 1st, 1865. Now, by this time, obviously, the little two rooms above the shop it was becoming crowded. So Michael and Catherine decided, well, it's time to build a house, acquire some property. So Michael, in 1866, he acquired lots 9 and 10. So lot 10 on North 2nd Street is where the Sallie House now stands, and lot 9 he also purchased, which is right next door to the Sallie House. So that was 504 North 2nd Street. And I'll talk about that house in a little while, but we'll concentrate on the Sallie House first. So in 1867, they started to build the Sallie House. And while it was being built, once they sort of started to get it together enough, they moved out of the shop, the rooms above the shop, and they moved into the basement of the Sallie House, and that's where they lived. So Michael and Catherine and the 3 children were in the basement. Then Catherine's father, Charles Catherines, came to live with them. So the house was full, and anyone who's been to the Sallie House knows it's not a huge house, but you know, it is what it is. And back in the day, all the children probably would have been in one room anyway. That's normally how it was done. In 1872, after being in the house for a short time, everything was coasting along well, and Catherine became pregnant again. So this would be their 4th child, 5th if you count the little one who passed away. Unfortunately for Michael, he never got to see the birth of his child, because in 1872, September, in the evening at 10 p.m, he passed away. He passed away in the house, and they prepared his body, and he was laid out in the parlour, the front room of the house, until his funeral. On Friday night at 10 o'clock, Michael Finney, in the 51st year of his age, died. The deceased was one of the oldest citizens of Atchison, having settled here early in 1856. He was engaged for many years in business as a forwarding and commission merchant, and was known and respected as an enterprising, intelligent and honourable businessman. His funeral will take place today at 2 o'clock from his residence on 2nd Street. And Michael was taken and laid to rest at the Mount Calvary Cemetery in Atchison. On May 25th, 1873, Richard Edwin Finney was born. The following year, Charles James Catherine's father, died July 14, 1874. Now, he lived with Kate and her family in the Sallie House, and he died in the Sallie House. Unfortunately, the same year in September, so only a few months after her father passed away, little Richard died. So her little baby, he passed away September 29, 1874. So life went on. A few years later, Catherine's son James, the eldest one, decided that he would build a house next door to the family home. So he did. He'd had a job. He was working as a salesman, so he had money. He built the house next door to the Sallie House, 504 North 2nd Street. So James decided to take a job in St. Louis in Missouri. He became a salesman for a company there called L.M. Rumsey Manufacturing Company. He ended up being one of their best salesmen. He had a very good reputation, but he never came home to Atchison, so he deeded the house back to his mum. He gave the deed of the house to his mum and said, "You have it, Mum." So 1881, the records show that the deed did in fact go back to his mother, Catherine. He remained in town up until around about 1883, but that is when he became a permanent resident of St. Louis for his job, for which he was commended. He was apparently one of the best salesmen that they'd ever had, and in fact in the country. In 1899, unfortunately, James became quite ill. He was admitted to the Evergreen Place Hospital at Leavenworth, Kansas, where he was treated for paresis of the brain, which nowadays we refer to as neurosyphilis. Now, back in the day, there was no cure for that, as there is now. So unfortunately, that led to his demise. And on the 18th of February 1900, James passed away. His body was returned home and laid out at the Sallie House, and on a Wednesday at 10 a.m, following his return, he was taken to the cathedral and then onward to the Mount Calvary Cemetery for burial. In future episodes, I'm going to touch on the owners of the house that James built, including a lady called Joanna Barnes. Now, Joanna Barnes has been linked to the haunting of the Sallie House. However, I could find nothing to substantiate why that would ever occur, but I'll tell you the story and I'll let you know what happened to Joanna in a future episode. Next episode, I'm going to talk about Charles Finney, and he's one of my favourites, so I hope you enjoy my presentation on Charles. And later on down the track, of course, I'll talk about Aggie and the rest of the family and their fates. So I hope you enjoyed this episode, and I hope you come back for the next. Thanks for watching.